Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Teach your children well. Their fathers help.
Well, our next guest over the last 15 years or so has helped countless students who needed a bit of assistance outside of the classroom with math, economics, physics, history, and more. Maybe it was for a bit of help with AP Calculus in high school, as it was for our producer, Elizabeth Cedrin, or for me, help with understanding accounting principles in business school.
I love it. Everybody is tapped into it. We just had a colleague talk to us about what he is doing and tapping into it. And it's not someone who's like 10 or 12 or 15.
No, he's like downloading the algebra one.
Right? To
which
refresh.
Is pretty cool.
Thinking about it. All right. Sal Khan, a familiar name and voice to so many people out there who've seen his YouTube videos. He is the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Khan Academy, as well as the Khan Lab School. He's got a new book out, Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education, Why That's a Good Thing. Sal, it is so good to have you here with us. And, you know, it's funny, we've been talking a lot about artificial intelligence, as you can imagine. First of all, how are you? Tell us about your world and how things have been.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm great. Things are busy, but busy in a good way. It's exciting. Obviously the book just got released. But more of what the book's about is we're living in a science fiction book these days. Khan Academy, a lot of folks know, and it's always great to hear that even people in your own team are benefiting from it or have benefited from it. But it all started with me tutoring my cousin, and everything that we've been doing over the last 20 years since then has been trying to scale up that type of personalization. And what we're now seeing with generative AI, even though there's a lot of issues, a lot of risks, a lot of things to work through, and I try to address that in the book, there's a lot of optimism, or at least I have a lot of hope, that it can do some really positive things, getting us that much closer to giving world-class education to everyone.
Well, it's so interesting, Saul, because when we talk about AI in the classroom, I think a year ago we were talking more about this idea that professors, teachers were so concerned about ChatGPT, for example, being used to write term papers or write essays, and having the software to detect whether or not a GPT wrote an essay. The question about having phones in classrooms, like the idea that technology has helped the classroom is there, but it's also been that technology has hurt the education experience. That's a big part of the conversation right now. How do those two things conflict with one another? How do you see them?
The reality is technology is always it's neutral. It can be positive or negative. You can think of a very simple technology like a knife. It can be used to hurt people. It could be used to cook. It could be used to build things. And we're seeing the same thing with cell phones and with AI. Yes. And the cheating is a real issue, and people are still scrambling. And, I have a whole chapter in the book about cheating, and the state of cheating even before AI was actually pretty bad. AI just really put a spotlight on it. Cell phones, social media obviously addict students, especially young people, in a certain way. And most of the literature, it's not good for them. But even before AI, there's really positive things you can do with technology. You can learn on Khan Academy. You can write a paper. You can code. You could edit video. And most of us, I think, as long as it's done in moderation, would be happy if our students spend some time, a few hours a week, doing that type of thing. And so the key is, how do you use technology to amplify positive intent, and then how do you also use it to mitigate the negative intent? We're building, and I write about it in the book, we're building tools that not only support students better in their writing, won't do it for them, it'll tutor them, it'll coach them, but it can make that process transparent for teachers. And by doing that, it actually undermines cheating, whether it's AI cheating or other forms.
How does it, though? Like, I think one of the things, the conversations we've been having, Sal, is about kind of this idea of, does it take some of our thinking away from us? Like, sometimes you got to struggle through a concept or a thought or a mathematical problem. Getting an assist can be helpful, but sometimes you got to sit with it for a little bit. And I do wonder about technology taking away some of that work that that we use our brain for. And I'm just a little nervous about that.
It's a valid fear. And what I believe is, one, in some cases, you do want the shortcut when you're working, et cetera. But in most cases, especially for students, we want them to develop those skills. And that's why everything we've been working on, Khanmigo, which is our AI assistant on Khan Academy, it doesn't answer the question. It will push you Socratically. So the other day I was trying to get it to explain supernovas at a deeper level. I know what they are, but exactly why does it explode? Why doesn't it just collapse? And its response wasn't to just give me a Wikipedia answer, or like the type that you'd get on ChatGPT. Its response was, well, can you explain to me what you already know? And then it kept pushing my thinking. Well, okay, if that leads to this, well, what do you think would happen there? And so it was a much more Socratic conversation that drives critical thinking. And so there's an opportunity to actually scale that type of learning that's been very hard in the past.
What is your AI tool like? What data are you pulling on for it?
So we are using the underlying frontier models, whether it's now GPT-4, Turbo, and Omni, et cetera.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, there's a lot of work to make it really special purpose for education. We're doing a lot of what's called in the trade now prompt engineering, prompt chaining, multiple calls. It's anchored on Khan Academy content that's been vetted by professionals for many years. It can slurp that stuff in as well. So we're putting a lot of the pieces together. We're not just relying on the raw model, which I don't think is a responsible way to do it for an education use case.
It's still it is a brave new world that we're living in. Your book's called Brave New Words. Yesterday, Saul, I don't know if you saw this, but a lot of people were posting on X about errors that Google's own AI search tool was making. My brother sent me one about eating rocks, and it actually had cited an Onion article that was joking about eating rocks. But, if you looked at eating rocks on the internet, it said it's recommended to eat rocks every day. And then you look at the source and it's the Onion.
Yeah.
So this is not, this is by no means an easy thing to figure out at this point, Sal.
No, not at all. And obviously I can't defend everything out there, but regardless, obviously the providers are going to work harder to make sure that things like that don't happen. But it's part of digital literacy now for users to recognize that every answer you're going to get from an AI, you're going to have to validate that. You're going to have to put that in context. And not all AIs are considered equal. And this isn't a new phenomenon. Well before generative AI, you could do a web search on Google and very easily click on something that's complete misinformation, or see a video on YouTube that's complete misinformation. So we've always had to try to give people that skill of how do they judge, how can they validate. I think that's true in an AI world, and I write a lot about it in the book. There are ways, and we are building these ways, that the AI can not only not do those things, but can help you validate what's real.
Listen, you are someone who was so at the frontier in terms of figuring out a really smart way to use technology to teach kids, and they still do it. I mean, you just think about what you did way back when, right? When it was kind of, I hate to say, almost simpler times.
The 2008 YouTube, it's very early.
It's a while, but it has helped so many and continues to do so. So you not glass half full with AI in this? You think it's going to be okay? You think it's going to be leaps and bounds in terms of teaching folks? I think about tutors. But anyway, you are all in. You feel comfortable about this.
Well, what I've told everyone, a lot of people are reading the book, I'm getting interviewed, they're like, hey, you tend to be more optimistic than most people. I was like, no, look, I'm afraid of all of the same stuff that a lot of people are saying.
Okay.
Bad people are going to use it to amplify bad intent. We're going to see deepfakes. We're going to see fraud. We're going to see state actors try to manipulate people in bad ways. That's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that the good people should just freeze and do nothing. We should use these tools to amplify positive intent. And so what I'm telling everyone, whether AI is a net positive or net negative, isn't like a flip of the coin. We're not just going to sit and watch. Good people should go out there and make the positive use cases happen. We shouldn't just talk about it. And they exist. And we are already seeing that in education. Just earlier this week, we made a big announcement with Microsoft. We're making these teacher tools that are going to save teachers time doing things like lesson planning and grading papers and writing progress reports, saving teachers hours a week. We're making that free, even though it costs a lot of money for the computation, making that free to all US teachers. So there's a lot of good that's already happening. And so I'm optimistic if good people put their energy and the resources behind it, we're going to get a net benefit from the technology.
As Carol mentioned, you harnessed tech early in your career, 2008 for YouTube. Is AI, in your opinion, more powerful than that?
Oh yeah, I think even if they froze AI today, there's 10 years of amazing things we could create with it. But the reality is the pace of innovation is only accelerating. So yes, what we're going to be able to do in 2, 3, 4, 5 years is going to be mind blowing.
Unbelievable.
I want to get right back to Sal Khan, a familiar name to so many people. He's the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Khan Academy, as well as the Khan Lab School. He's got a new book out. It's called Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing. Sal, we're going to get back to the book in just a second, but as we were on our planning call this morning, we were talking about Khan Academy, and we were all sharing our experiences with it, and it feels like with you, because those early videos were really you and you only teaching us so much. And we're asking ourselves, is it a nonprofit still? And, went up and looked, and it still is a nonprofit. And I'm wondering, talk to us a little about the structure of the organization and why a nonprofit is the right model for you.
Yeah, and it's always good to hear those stories. And I still make a lot of videos. I made a couple this morning.
That's amazing.
But there's 3 Harvard Business School case studies on Khan Academy, and the question that it normally boils down to is, should Khan Academy be a for-profit or nonprofit? We clearly have a social mission, but we have some of the behaviors or the properties of a high growth for-profit. We're very tech focused. We're out here in Silicon Valley. We scale, et cetera, et cetera. For me, it was honestly an emotional decision when I incorporated Khan Academy back in 2008. There were some VCs who were interested, and I'm not against for-profit. My previous life, I was a hedge fund analyst, which was very for-profit, but it felt like education, and it still feels that way, is a space where maybe the markets don't always lead to outcomes that are optimal or outcomes that are aligned with our values. And there were folks even back in 2008 who were using the content, who were telling me how it was changing their life. And I was like, well, I'm not sure if they would be able to access it if they didn't have it. And as a hedge fund analyst, I also saw how you could have a founder who really is mission driven of a for-profit, but you fast forward 50 years, 100 years, the capital structure changes, the incentives change. And I didn't want that to happen. So I did a kind of delusional thing. I was in this walk-in closet when I filled out the paperwork with the IRS. I said, what if Khan Academy could be like the next Oxford or the next Smithsonian? Even at that time, we had actually served more students than Harvard had in its history, even when I was just one guy in a walk-in closet. And I said, what if we could reach billions? And so it was a little bit of delusional optimism, but it feels less delusional now.
Really interesting. I do want to go back to the book, if we may. Your book, Brave New Words: How AI Will Revolutionize Education, and why that's a good thing. Sal, where do you think AI will have the biggest impact on education? Is it the approach? Is it a certain area? I'm just curious.
The technology is so powerful. I think every hour that you spend brainstorming, you realize it'll have more and more implications. I mean, in any industry, especially education. When OpenAI first reached out to us in summer of 2022, and this was 6 months before ChatGPT came out, and we were able to get early access to GPT-4. Many folks know that even the first ChatGPT wasn't built on GPT-4; it was built on a previous model. We immediately gravitated to, hey, how can this be a tutor for any student? Really do the types of things that I was doing with my cousins 20 years ago, and these frontier models now, like GPT-4, Gemini, et cetera, they really can emulate what a tutor could do via chat. And many folks have probably seen the demo that for Omni, GPT-4 Omni, that came out last week. It's me and my son. They brought us in to see if we could do some fun stuff with it. And you can talk to it in a natural way, and it can see your writing, and it can see your face. And it really felt like a live tutoring session. That's all coming. But then there's the other side of the equation. There's what you could do with teachers, helping them write lesson plans, helping be a co-teacher for that teacher, be a teaching assistant, helping them grade papers. That's already happening. We're already getting feedback from school districts using Conmigo that their teachers are saving 5 to 10 hours a week. That's a huge benefit for teachers who are spread thin, who are in many cases overworked. So it's a benefit for them. But I see us going 5 years into the future where it's even able to facilitate interactions between people. A teacher can say, hey, let's do a breakout. Yeah. The AI says, okay, I'll set up the breakout rooms, and actually I will moderate the conversation at each breakout, and I will bring it back to you, an AI. And this, we have to just be careful that the data privacy and it doesn't get creepy, but an AI can say, hey, we haven't called on Mary in a little while. Why don't we call on her? Or she looks disengaged, or he looks disengaged. Let's use that to personalize the lessons more. So it really will feel like a teaching assistant.
Hey, Sal, you mentioned Conmigo, and Conmigo is featured prominently in your book. Can you explain what it is and how you guys built it on GPT-4?
Yeah, well, this is back in almost 2 years ago, 18 months ago. We saw there's a lot of potential for the raw technology, but we also said, hey, this could be used for cheating. If you're talking about kids, how do you know that they're not trying to do shady things with the AI? How do you protect their data privacy? How do you make sure that it doesn't make errors in math and hallucinate? And so we said, there's a lot of work here to take this raw AI model and make it appropriate for schools. So our AI tool set for teachers and students, we call Conmigo. And it does that's what it's doing. It won't cheat. It will work with you Socratically. It'll actually help undermine other forms of cheating, even AI-based cheating. It makes everything transparent to the teacher. It'll actively notify parents and teachers if students try to do something shady with the AI. We're introducing interfaces. Not everything should be a chat interface. We're doing interfaces where a student can write an essay, co-create a document. Once again, all of that is transparent to the teacher. The AI can highlight parts of the document and give students feedback on it. We've created activities where it can act as a bit of a career and guidance counselor for a teacher, for a student. Once again, not to replace the human beings in their life, but really to amplify that impact. Whenever a student needs it, it's there. And then when they get with the teacher or their guidance counselor, they can go deeper.
Hey, listen, one thing we talk about a lot, Sal, as you would imagine, is college admissions. And you have a chapter towards the end of the book devoted to that. The first line in it says, the classic components considered in college admissions are grades, standardized tests, extracurriculars, essays, and letters of recommendation. AI will change how most, if not all, of these factors are valued, developed, and evaluated. Those are your words. What impact will it have on that process?
It is really across the board. As we know, these things are all about writing. And what we do also know is, there was the Varsity Blue scandal several years ago where we saw these corrupt coaches, admissions coaches that you could hire to almost fabricate a college admissions. But what we know, in especially places like Silicon Valley, where I live, New York, a lot of affluent people, upper middle class people, well before AI, they were paying $400. It's still happening, paying $400 or $500 an hour to have these professionals advise their kids on how to maximize their essays, etc. Now, the ethical ones are just act as coaches, but it's still a huge advantage. And the less ethical ones are essentially writing these essays. And, I think admissions officers, and I write about this in the book, they've kind of known about this, but they've kind of intentionally not wanted to address the elephant in the room about the inequity. And to the fact that the AIs can now do some of this work for all students, it really just puts a spotlight on something that's always there. And it makes you wonder whether you can get richer points of data for a student than a recommendation, than an essay. But that's where the AI could be interesting too. Future admissions, SAT type things could have free response. You could have to talk things through. You could write it out, and then the AI could make sense of that.
So cool. There's also a chapter about employment in an AI world. There's so much in this book. Sal, thank you for finding time for us to talk about. Sal Khan, of course, his new book, Brave New Words.